power. And Mussolini felt himself as being literally the king, the powerful figure of all of Italy. Now, this road leads all the way to Piazza Venezia, which is the central piazza in Rome, with this big wedding cake building. That's the monument to Victor Emmanuel, the president. And he built this road in order to have a triumphal route for his forces. So this is Mussolini linking the Colosseum, the ancient past, to Piazza Venezia, which became the center of the fascist power. So he linked his own reign to the Colosseum, the symbol of antiquity. Now, when he did that, he also destroyed a number of archaeological areas because he wanted to make this connection. I'll show you a picture of what I mean. Look at this. Imagine running just kind of gently in Rome on a morning, running towards the Colosseum. Well, there used to be a hill that ran from here to here. And that hill, archaeologists today would be able to meticulously excavate it and find important buildings that we don't know of yet, or equate them with buildings we do know. We're located right about here, by the way. You see the Colosseum on the bottom. This is Piazza Venezia. This is that great road. And this runner is right about there. All right? So he cut away with a pickaxe. He was known as the gutter, right? G-U-T-T, or gutter. He gutted Rome in order to make his vision of ancient Rome. And if you look across Rome, almost every major archaeological park bears Mussolini's stamp. So you can see just how brutal he was about that. One thing, by the way, so this is a major traffic route in Rome today. The mayor of Rome has just announced that it was going to be made into a pedestrian walkway, which is going to cause possibly the biggest, what's a nice word for it, the biggest problematic traffic system in the entire world. I mean, it's going to be a horrible thing. So I'm waiting to see how that works out. July 31st is the last day where traffic can drive on that. And there's been this giant argument. In fact, the mayor was knocked off his bike because of people protesting about this. So keep your eye out for that. It will be quite interesting. Now, Mussolini also demolished one of my favorite archaeological sites. This is a picture pre-Mussolini. Okay. Remember, I'll show you where we are. This is the area we're in right now. See how beautiful, straight, open lines with a single Colosseum brilliantly in the center, nothing around it. There's a triumphal parade route through this triumphal arch, down this way along this road. So this is what it looks like today, because Mussolini said, this is cool, this is ugly, so we must demolish it. This is the only thing we have left of what's called the Meta Sudans. It was this fountain, right, that was very central to the Roman conception of the area. And we actually have an engraving of it right here, which is located sometime in the, I think it's the 16th century. So Mussolini simply said, we're going to demolish it and create that road, right, without any kind of unattractive things. Again, Mussolini has brilliantly made monuments visible and important, but has also destroyed lots of smaller things that people like myself would love to be able to excavate and look at today. Poor Meta Sudans. No one gives it any love. All right. Any questions? Okay, so here's the Colosseum today. I want you to look at this and tell me what you notice. What's that?
Rocks are crumbling.
Rocks are crumbling. Yeah, you see that there's some pock marks. I mean, that's the inevitable age. And sometimes they were trying to find the iron inside of the blocks. The travertine blocks were linked by iron. You'll see that people cut away a little bit of stone to get the iron out so they can reuse it. Look at the color. This is built out of something called travertine, which is a beautiful white stone that takes a great edge that's located in Tibur, just up the road from Rome. Look at this. Does that look white to you? This is smog. This is the disgusting things that happen when cars drive around it, and that's one of the reasons why the mayor wants to make it a more pedestrian area, because they're worried about having to restore this, right? So we have this problem. In 2012, they had the coldest winter on record, and it caused cracks in the stone and it fractured it. And in fact, in December, actually 2011, several pieces fell from the Colosseum during operating hours. And now they've got the common sense to now build a fence around the Colosseum. So unless you go inside the Colosseum, you cannot get up and touch the Colosseum anymore because of the problems of the falling rocks. Well, you would imagine that maybe they could find a way to fix this and to shore it up. Well, here's where the Italian morass comes into play. Here's some fast facts for you, just to give you a sense of the modern issues with this. They have 4 million visitors plus a year, which brings in, believe it or not, 35 million euros, which is about $46 million. Right? Now, the problem is that this money doesn't go back to the Colosseum. Like, none of it. None of it directly goes to the Colosseum. All the ticket sales for this goes to the Italian state. Right? And then they, the Italian state, sends a little bit back to the Colosseum to fix it up. Here's a fact. 47 million euros went to monuments and museums in 2013. Right? This also includes the 20 million from Pompeii, the millions that come from the Forum, other museums as well. So only a fraction, small fraction of the money that Romans and the Italians take in every year go back to the monuments. Right? In June 17th, to give you a sense of how bad it is right now, on June 17th and 20th, there was a strike at the Colosseum where the workers refused to open up the gates because they had not been paid since January. Right? So you can go to Rome today, you can buy your $1,000 plane ticket and your $200 hotel in Rome, and you can walk up to the Colosseum today and it might be closed. Right? That's a scary thing for someone like yourself who's invested the money, but it's also problematic for the Roman tourism industry. Right? You don't want people to feel like they can't come there because there might be some kind of problem. When I was there in 2010, I opened up the newspaper the very first morning I was there, Il Messaggero, and it said 25 million euros is coming from a private organization to renovate the Colosseum, to get rid of all that horrible smog, to restore it to its pristine beauty, to travertine, and also to pay for other kind of renovations, to make the interior look more like it would have in antiquity. Well, as it turns out, they have not yet started work. The bureaucracy of Rome is so bad that they have yet to start work. And the mayor, who just got elected about a month ago to try to make that pedestrian walkway, has said it will start within 10 days today. So we'll see if that actually happens. But it's amazing that someone can say, I'm going to give you $25 million or euros to fix this, and it takes 3 years before anything's even started. It's unbelievable. And I mentioned that in January and February 2012, cold weather caused cracks and pieces falling. And in fact, today, there's still pieces that may or may not fall, and that's why they built that iron fence around it. So the Colosseum has a lot of problems, and we have to think about why in the world is it that we can't keep these places, these wonderful, what's what I'm looking for, these treasures of the world and history from going into a state of disrepair. All right. Right now, just to let you know, there's some other things happening. They're putting in a new subway line. Rome only has 2 subways. Think about London that has this really intricate system of subways. Rome has only had 2, and one of the reasons why there's lots of traffic in Rome is because there are not enough subways. They're putting in a 3rd subway line, which is supposed to come into service, get this, in 2020. Right? So we have 7 years to go. They're going to have it up to about here in 2015, but it's going to take them that much longer to get to this place. One of the reasons why, by the way, is that when you build a subway line, that subway line, unless you bury it really deeply, right, is going to run through all the Roman archaeological buildings and monuments. So they have to sink it all the way down 70 feet below the surface to make sure it doesn't hurt anything. And all these stops that they're planning have to be excavated. In fact, the fruits of one of these excavations is a brilliant find. This is absolutely relatively new, just announced last year. They found, this is that wedding cake. I find it atrocious. Some people find it charming. I find it atrocious. This is Hadrian, who was emperor from, let me think of this real quick, 117 to 138 AD. His personal auditorium, where there were songs, singers, and poetry recitals, brilliantly laid out in marble. And we probably know where it is, only because of the subway. We would never have found this unless the subway was being put in, because there's just not enough money to excavate in all those places where we know we can find cool stuff. However, you'll notice it's blocking that major roadway. This is that road I was talking about that's going to become pedestrian, probably partly because this is blocking most of the traffic anyway, so it makes a lot of sense to do that. Any questions before we leave Rome and go to Pompeii? No? All right. We're going to move down south to the Bay of Naples, which is, by the way, a place you should all go for a week's vacation or a month's vacation or retirement. Especially along this coastline here, beautiful places with water and just beautiful sunshine most of the time. We're going to move to Pompeii, mainly because it's the most famous, right? If you're going, by the way, to Italy to go see an ancient city, I would recommend not Pompeii, but Herculaneum for a number of reasons, not least of which it's better preserved, for reasons I'll explain in just a few minutes. And also, it's small enough that you can do it in a day and not feel like you have to rush all over the place. Anyway, so we're in Pompeii, and I'll give you a little background about the eruption of Vesuvius and why we have Pompeii. Pompeii, obviously, with Herculaneum and the other cities that you see marked south of Naples. Naples was not affected by this, but was covered in a giant eruption in 79 AD, which was depicted in a series of letters, an eyewitness account by a Roman about this eruption, and I'm going to challenge that eyewitness in just a few minutes. But the Romans didn't have a name for a volcano. They just simply said mountain that spewed fire. Our word volcano is a later development, which comes from the Roman god Vulcan, who is the god of forge and fire. So volcano means fiery mountain. And we know geologically of major eruptions about 6000 BC, about 3500 BC or so, 2000 BC, we actually discovered footprints in that layer, so we know that it was populated in 2000 and that they were running away from the volcano. And of course we have 79 AD, and there was a minor one that happened in the 16th century. But what I want to point out is you notice that the average number of years between major eruptions is about 2,000 years. Pause for effect. Seismologists tell us that it is not threatening, but it just makes you think that every 2,000 years there's going to be an eruption. We might want to have a plan and come back to that in just a second. The 79 AD eruption was massive. It occurred in two phases. It was a 2-day-long event. The first event was August 24th, we think, right? Pliny, the eyewitness, tells us it was August 24th. I'm going to tell you that recent evidence has proven that it's probably more likely a November eruption, that the text that we depend on is probably corrupt, probably problematic. So it's probably November, based on scientific evaluation of jars. The harvest of wine has already been conducted. We found a coin that could not have been minted before October of 79 AD. So there's a lot of reasons to think that the traditional date that everyone tells you the volcano erupted is not right. Well, the first phase, 24th of August or whatever day it was, the volcano erupted in a column of ash that went and started to billow like a mushroom as these large volcanic eruptions happened. And then the prevailing winds were driving it southeast from the volcano. Pompeii, you'll see, is in the kind of strike zone of this. And most of the initial deaths in Pompeii and also the roof collapses happened in this first phase. The pumice, the ash fell, these flat roofs collapsed, and people very frequently perished underneath the ash. The second phase, which is when the column of ash spewing upwards gets too heavy and pushes against itself and forces it back down at rapid speeds of almost 400 miles per hour and at heats of 300 degrees and higher, rushing down the side of the mountain. And that rush, there were 6 of these that rushed down, covering not only Pompeii, dealing in a final death blow essentially, but also Herculaneum, which because of its location and because of the exact temperature when that flow came down, carbonized all organic material. So you have wood, carbonized wood, loaves of bread we actually have. We have all kinds of foodstuffs that were located there as well. So this is a very important series of events that allowed us to have these. Just to give you a sense of what those giant pyroclastic flows that flow down the mountainside at these super high speeds. Look at the pushing of the ash cloud upwards down at this massively fast speed. I just can't imagine what is going through the mind of that poor person. And this is coming at over 100 kilometers an hour. They don't go any slower. So I do not know what the fate of that person was in that Jeep. I just hope that they were able to outrace the poor pyroclastic. This is actually in a Pacific island where they had one of these and they could document it. In fact, we didn't even know about the second phase until the early 20th century when someone actually saw this taking place on a volcano at Martinique, so it was 1902. So we know now because we can study the kind of outward flow. Just to give you a sense of how deep it was in Herculaneum, 70 meters. Right, and imagine having to try and excavate down. One of the reasons why everyone says Pompeii, Pompeii, Pompeii when they think about the ancient world is because Herculaneum, which was found first, was too hard to get down there. So Pompeii, which was easier because it was further away, it was only buried about 13 meters of light ash, they were able to excavate much more easily. So that's why we actually think of Pompeii rather than Herculaneum. At any rate, look at this. This is a frightening thought. This is the Mount Vesuvius, Naples. This is where Pompeii is, and this is the populated area from a NASA satellite image. 5 million people live in the area that Vesuvius could affect, and the Italian government does not have a suitable evacuation plan remotely in place.
That's because most of them are Neapolitans.
That is true. The Neapolitans stubbed their nose. In fact, in the 1538 eruption, they all came outside and sacrificed to Saint Gennaro, their patron saint, and they were saved from it, but mainly because the prevailing winds just happened to be going down south. So if the prevailing winds are going north, which is what happens in August, by the way, one of the reasons why we think it can't possibly be an August eruption in '79 is because they were going south. They would be going north usually in the summertime. So if a summer eruption happens, Naples is in the strike zone as well. So just to give you a thought, like this is these sort of things where, it's a ticking time bomb. At any rate, here's what it looks like from Pompeii itself. We're in the Forum of Pompeii. Every city outside of Rome had a forum as well. Unlike Rome, it was usually geometric and rectangular. We're facing the city, the volcano. And right now, this is what the shape looks like. The actual ancient line is here. This is a new cone that is formed since '79. The actual mountain would have been about there. And during the eruption, it lost all of that and sunk back down into a caldera. And here would have been a nice little temple to Jupiter, Capitoline like Rome. And here we have a still from a very, very fine movie that they produced in connection with the revolving Pompeii exhibit that's now in London, as it turns out, which is about a 6-minute overview of what actually happened, including the ashfall and also the pyroclastic flows down to the city. We would be right here, we'd be located up right here. You see this nice rectangular forum that is in the center of Pompeii. Now the reason why we're in Pompeii is because I want to talk about a particular building that collapsed, which is the House of the Gladiators. We'll get to that in a second. Here is a plaster cast of one of the victims of Pompeii, of the eruption in Pompeii. When the excavators were excavating, they occasionally found these kind of weird-looking empty spaces as they're excavating. And finally, one of the excavators said, well, next time we find one of those, let's just pump plaster and see what this looks like. As they did that, they found out that they could reproduce the bodies as they died. If you'll notice, there's this kind of clenching. That is indicative of death by heat. And it's probably, this person probably perished during that giant wave of superheated ash that swept down the mountainside. But if you look at Pompeii, this is a representation. Here's the forum, so Vesuvius would be up here. There's the amphitheater in Pompeii in the far reaches. By the way, the oldest The first amphitheater ever built was in Pompeii. And then it crept up towards Rome. So we think that gladiatorial combat started down south and moved up north. There's this area called the Via dell'Abbondanza. It means the way of abundance, because when excavators in the 20s excavated this area, they found beautiful shops with great wall paintings and so on. Now, what I want to do is focus you on a single place, right here. This is region 3, this is block number 3, the excavators have this kind of chart. You'll notice that there's some blank space behind it, here and here. That's unexcavated area. One of the principles of archaeology is that you excavate a little at a time and you leave material for later archaeologists to excavate with better tools. And today we can do a lot more. But one of the problems with this is that this is an area of land that is higher and unexcavated, which can become waterlogged, right? So the decision not to excavate this means that incredible pressure is put on these particular buildings right here. And when I was there, we were about to go to Pompeii with the students in November, it was announced that the House of the Gladiator had fallen because of torrential rain. So a lot of rain took place in 2010 in October and November. Here's a picture of the House of the Gladiators. It probably wasn't a house for gladiators, it was a meeting place for trainers. But these beautiful frescoes, so wet plaster with paint attached to it. This color here is the famous Pompeian red. In fact, when I have my new dining room, I'm hoping my wife will allow me to paint it Pompeian red. We'll see what that happens. But it also has some graffiti, right? Etchings into the wall painting of gladiators, right? We have a lot of these throughout southern Italy. And you can see that gladiatorial combat would have been with music. These are instruments. Here's two particular kinds of gladiators fighting each other. And so this was a really important building with a peristyle, so open air, and then rooms around it, that we could study, right? Well, here's a couple of the wall paintings we found there. This is one that happened. You'll notice it's not color, because this particular wall painting was destroyed in 1943 when the Allies bombed Pompeii because they thought that Nazi Germans were occupying the buildings as hiding places. And one of the buildings that was harmed greatly was the House of the Gladiator. So it's not a new thing that we have problems now, but there was a lot of damage done. Some of them were able to be rehabilitated, renovated, and redone, but many of them were absolutely lost. And in fact, a lot of really important buildings and knowledge was lost because of that. There's still a debate whether or not Germans were there, so go figure. This is what it looks like today. When we walked there was a big screen, a chain link fence, and we were faced with this massive rubble. All the wall paintings were destroyed, reduced to that. Right? I mean, this is simply the last line of a number of bad decisions that people of Pompeii have done. First of all, they didn't have a good plan for how to avoid the waterlogging that would put too much pressure forcing it out. Pompeii also does not have the manpower, the people, the custodi, the guardians, to actually look after it, even though the money is absolutely there. I'll talk about that in just a second. And third, they simply have ignored the calls for shoring up. In 2011, after this happened, they brought in UNESCO, which is the United Nations Scientific and Cultural Arm, who wrote a scathing report that said you have a few years to get your act together, otherwise there's going to be some kind of a problem. So we're going to end with a couple things here. Right, some fast facts about Pompeii, and then I'll open up for further questions. It gets fewer than the Colosseum, but the 2.4 million visitors each year. The town probably had a population of 23,000 people. During the height of the summer, there can be twice as many visitors than people who lived there in the past. So in other words, there's a lot of visitors that come there absolutely every single year. They do not have enough guards to watch every place, so vandalism and stealing are quite problematic. They bring in 20 million euros a year. Right? You would think that would be able to keep these buildings up and running. And in fact, in 1997, a law was passed specifically for Pompeii, unlike the Colosseum, that Pompeii can use the ticket sales for itself. In other words, if the 20 million doesn't go to the Italian state and you get 10 million back, but that they can use it for themselves. As it turns out, the bureaucracy has been crazy. The UNESCO report in 2011 has still not been acted upon, and the person who wrote the report came back last month and said, you guys have a real problem. In addition to the 20 million euros per year it gets, the European Union gave $105 million to shore up all of these falling buildings. They have not used a dime or a centesimi. Right? They have not used anything for this. So they have until January, Pompeii does, to have a series of actions. Otherwise, funding may disappear entirely. Now, there are some problems with this. First of all, if you look at the map of Pompeii, there's a giant amount of area. All of these spaces that are lined in with all these numbers, those are all open to the air. Right? So there's almost 10,000 inhabitable areas in Pompeii that they have to maintain and look after. Most of them, however, are closed to the public. You go to Pompeii today and you can only see about 1/50th of the spaces available. And they guide you through there. Back in 1956, 80% of Pompeii was open to visitors. So if you think about that, there's been a lot of problems that have happened. I'm going to end with one of the saddest things ever. This is a wall painting with Pompeian red of a nymph dancing that is in Pompeii. What do you notice about this?
Graffiti.
You see the graffiti, right? Modern graffiti. And this is not uncommon. It's not uncommon. Furthermore, lots of wall paintings in Pompeii are still in the building where it was found, open to the air. Now, if any of you have taken art history, you know that frescoes do great when they're in a protected, sealed environment, but when the sun hits it or rain hits it, they disappear quite rapidly. So, we're fortunate that most of the wall paintings in Pompeii were looted by the Bourbon kings, who went there not to find archaeological information, but simply to find statues and to find wall paintings. This fine wall painting was from Pompeii. It's in the Naples Archaeological Museum, which everyone should go to in their life. This is Perseus, the mythological hero who killed Medusa. That's Medusa right there, saving Andromeda, who will become his wife. Notice the beautiful yellows, the dark skin. Males are always dark skin, females are light skin. That little hair is one that marks extreme beauty, and he's saving her from this monstrous sea monster with the help of some winged sandals that he was given, right? I mean, if you think about this, this is at the crux of the problem. You want people to be able to go to Pompeii and see things for themselves and how they were, but you'll have this, problems of figuring out how to protect it. You take it out of its context, you put it in a museum, but at the same time, that also doesn't feel somehow satisfactory. A museum can control it, they can keep it very, very beautiful, they can keep it in pristine condition, but it's not in its place. You may remember that the great Parthenon in Greece, in Athens, Greece, these beautiful reliefs that were taken, they were bought legally at the time from the Turks by the British and are now in the British Museum. Of course, Greece wants them back, but if they had never been taken to London, very likely they would have been completely destroyed and have them not at all today. So thank you guys for your time. If you have questions, I'm happy to talk to you about this for hours and hours. Thank you. Questions?
So I was talking about the early marbles and things. Are a lot of these, or any of these frescoes in countries other than Italy? And are they trying to get them back, or they're just sort of given up?
You know, most of the wall paintings are in the Naples Museum.
Okay.
There's some in Rome and some travel, but because of the nature, that map of the two Sicilies, the Spanish owned Naples and all the south. So basically, they sent their engineers and archaeologists in there to get these and bring them back. So it wasn't a matter of a foreign group of people excavating, it was the Spanish who were excavating it. And as it turns out, if you go to Naples, you'll also find lots of cool stuff from Rome, because one of these Bourbon kings married one of the Farnese daughters, who was a famous family up in Rome. And that's why you have lots of statues from the Baths of Caracalla, which are in Rome, down there. But this is not an example of where foreign nationals come in and then take them back to their problem. They're mainly in the Archaeological Museum of Naples, and there are lots of them. I mean, I spent 5 hours photographing every single one I could. And it took me 5 hours because it's just, there's so many of them. And you just imagine if they were in Pompeii and Pompeii's buildings were somewhat intact. Imagine, these would have been marvelous, right? Houses, I mean, this is ancient wallpaper, right? I mean, that's, the Romans painted their walls and frescoes in order to adorn them. But this is absolutely marvelous. But most of them are in Naples. Yeah?
The Herculaneum excavated not just that it was so much more.
Herculaneum?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we think that we excavated a fourth of Herculaneum. And we have a kind of 1/4. We haven't found the Forum. We haven't hit, there's a theater that we know where it is, but we haven't excavated around that. But about 3/4 of it still needs to be excavated. The problem in Herculaneum is not only that you have to go 70 meters of this really super hard packed ash, but there's a modern city on top of it, and you can't just simply dispossess people because you want to go down there. The thing about Herculaneum is that we found in the Villa of the Papyri, we found rolls of papyrus that we can now read because of multispectral imaging. You shoot multiple levels of light through it, and you can actually read. And we actually have increased our knowledge about philosophy several times over because we can actually read them. So one of the pressing issues of Herculaneum is that excavators want to excavate because of the possibility of finding more papyrus rolls that will extend our knowledge of literature, philosophy, and history many times over. But there's simply no way of getting around people living on top of this tufa, this volcanic layer. You can't just kick them off. I mean, you can try and buy them, but these people have been there for generations. Yeah?
Did you take most of these photos yourself?
Many of these are my own photos. So some of the, I took this one because I was sitting there while my colleague was lecturing to the students, and we had just given a lecture earlier about protecting these things. And I turned around and I said, really? So I clicked, and then I realized everywhere I looked, there was graffiti. I took those off of the internet because I don't have really clear pictures without the chain link fence. I want to give you the kind of thing, but most of these are mine. I actually have 5,000 pictures from my year in Rome. Last time I gave this talk about 5 months ago, the end of the thing was basically a slideshow. We're here for until about 9, so I won't bore you with that. Well, if you have individual questions, please come up and see me. I'm happy to spend some more time with you. And thank you guys again.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Please do take a minute to fill out your evaluations if you can. You can leave them on the back table here. And hopefully we'll see you at some more library events. Anybody need a pen? Yep, I have pens here. Over tonight. You're very welcome. It's hard to know. Sometimes we have to appreciate it.
They just come and read that. Slideshow.
Pictures, you
Yes.
know,
Email us or?
but maybe, you know, it's just incredible.
Yeah.
And they can't do it.
I guess it worked. That's right, I guess it worked. Are you all done?
Yeah.
There you go. Why don't you grab one? Thank you for coming tonight.
Very glad I did.
Glad you made it.
Well, Plantas, there's a villa of so-called Pompeii who was near his wife. And we also just found in 1980, there was another villa of Cassius. They found 54 skeletons there. And I'm telling you, this is a massively fine history. One, there were two groups. They wanted to sell it. There was a group that had been clutching valuable coins and other things. The second one, they had that. The postulates had their laborers and slaves. However, they had the exact same level of hygiene and nutrition. So if that hypothesis stands, because the slaves are not as poorly treated right now. It could also be that they're robbers and non-robbers. I mean, there's a lot of things. But they also found one skeleton was a pair of twins.